Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a sentient floating lava mollusk protected by an impenetrable shell.
Tim Longo.
That was one of my favorite scans this week. That just made me laugh because it was. They are these like mollusk-looking things, huge, gigantic ones. That bob up out of the lava and open, and if you shoot them, they flip over, so you can jump on them. So they're path makers, but you have to shoot them first. So I don't know. I think that's great. But I also just thought that was really, really funny. A sentient floating lava mollusk, of course, like you do.
Yeah. I'm often because even though I'm a Metroid fan, I'm often I'm a fan, but I don't know all the games, inherently, and kind of, as much as say Metal Gear or something like that. So I'm often thinking to myself, is this a 3D translation of something from one of the other 2D games, or is this brand new? And so I'm sure there's charts and things out there that some fans have built that tells you like what was in what, but because there's times like the little guys that crawl and around a platform, like it's like
very Metroid. Yeah,
that's I know, I remember those, or the shriek bats or something like that, right? There's kind of obvious ones, but it's funny it was sort of, I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes with the music too. It's like I'm now starting to wonder if the music in Metroid Prime ended up being my sort of canonical music. And so some of it definitely, some of it is based on, Super Metroid or whatever, right? Like the touch tones of music. But I'm like, my retconning is like, for me, I think the Metroid soundtrack, I'm coming to realize, has always been for a long time Metroid Prime specifically. Yeah. And so when I hear, because I hadn't played Super Metroid for a long, long time since until we played it, and so I'm kind of mixing up the timeline on some of that stuff because I hear this score of this game as we're playing, and I'm just like, it's so nostalgic, but I think in many cases it's just specific to this game, but I could be wrong.
No, I it's funny for me, the sound I know the most is the one I was, doing before we got on, which was the do 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 do, because it was also the start of the theme to the Brainy Gamer podcast. So I would hear that when I was listening to that, and then he went into some little guitar riff. Yeah. So was it? I guess it was a guitar riff. Yeah, so it's something that I've heard many, many times. Of course, I'm hearing it many, many times now too, as well. I guess it's the save sound, but when you get out of the save, I think, So
So are you still playing Fusion at the same time? Are you noticing any?
Well, I had gotten to basically the end of Fusion. I got to the last time we talked about it, so that'll be 2 weeks ago since we released, because this will be coming out almost a week from now. But so like I got basically to a boss. I got to where you fight the Samus X, and then
I don't remember that. I don't think I finished it.
Okay, yeah, and then I think after that you can just kind of clean up and then do the final. So I think that I'm basically at the end of that one, and that fight was really tough, and I was like, I don't know if I really need to do this again. Because it was very timing, and my hands are just not. It's actually something I wouldn't mind talking about a little bit, is that when I play Metroid games, I go, especially the Prime games, although it's true to a degree of Fusion as well, I think of them as crab hand games. Because a lot of inputs are chorded, where you've got to hold this button to, change the mode, because they want so many things. Plus, you also want to frequently be powering up a weapon while you're doing something. So you want to jump and also be powering up your plasma, or something.
Press and holds are rough for
press and holds are rough, and I'm having some carpal tunnel as a result because I've been playing it a fair amount over the last few days, and so today I actually had to take some ibuprofen finally because my hands are starting to hurt. So it's
you're old.
Yeah, this is a thing with me. I mean, for sure, I have a lot of hand problems. When you type all day, and then you turn around and for your leisure time, you're holding a controller. It's not necessarily the best, especially when you're playing a crab hand game. So,
I mean, it's a great system in many ways, but the Switch is not ergonomic. It's just not.
Yeah,
and no one will tell me otherwise. I don't think anyone agrees that it is, but.
Yeah, I've been playing this week mostly with the sort of slide in the controller, right? The one that I think just came with it, right? It's just
the dog ears.
Yeah. Yes. And it's not good. I think that in particular is making it worse because I was playing it loose before, but for whatever reason, one of my controllers, the cover that goes on the metal thing where it attaches to things is just loose, and so I'm like holding it and that thing's sliding, and I'm like, well, screw it, I'll just put it in my put it in that controller base thing if I can find it, and I think it is not helping, but so we'll see. I'll be playing in handheld for the next 10 days. So
I will say the Pro controller is very good.
Is it?
So yeah, if you are playing on the TV at some point, you might want to invest because it's very comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. Do the Joy-Cons
I guess you
just
can
plug into that as well?
What's that?
Do the Joy-Cons just plug into that as well?
No. It's
a whole separate controller.
It's just a whole separate controller. Yeah. No, they're not involved.
Okay. Does it charge? Can you recharge it?
Yeah. It's rechargeable. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the dual sense,
Okay.
in that way. Now the question, I don't know, you might be able to use it with, the handheld, like put in using the little stand. So you might be able to use the Pro controller. And yeah, of course you can because it's Bluetooth. I don't think you need the base. Anyway.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen in the next 10 days. But it's good to know that I can plan to order that when I come back.
But you're right. On Metroid games specifically, they are, Castlevania games, right? Or Metroidvania games. They're this weird. I think that's why they're popular with a little bit more hardcore gamers, because they're this weird hybrid of difficulty, but also like interesting progression and interesting world design. It's an interesting mishmash of things.
There's a lot of player skill, then of course you've got the discovery, the investigation, right? All that. And typically they have, just because of their structure, there's like inherent mystery of like, I wonder what that's going to be when I can do that, whatever that is. And also, of course, the reveal of like that thing you've been seeing that you thought was just a decorative element turns out is really important in some way or whatever. So all of those things I agree totally make, are kind of catnip because it has everything, but then this sort of level of difficulty. I mean, I played a fair amount of Hollow Knight, but that was another one that
I'm playing that too right now.
Gave me crab hands, and I got to a point. There was one so you were having some trouble with the morph ball boost half pipe thing.
I figured out what it was actually, but yeah.
Okay, well, we can talk about that part as well because I was in a spot today where, being a little bit behind the scenes, I was just having the worst time getting the timing right in one, and I think it's camera dependent because you've got to push the stick in the right direction.
Yeah,
and so it's just this weird angle.
It's not perfect.
Yeah,
it's very finicky, and you can really mess it up with one slight.
Yeah, and then again, I just got to start over.
The sticks on the Switch are terrible for throw, so it's really easy to aim in the wrong direction.
Yep, and so I finally did it, and then a text went off on my phone. And it was Tim, and it made me let go of the controller, and I fell because I had to do it into a spider ball, so I had to go up and attach and hold, and there were like these bugs crawling around. I mean, it was just for like a missile expansion, but when I was having such trouble doing it, I'm like, I have to be able to do this. Like that happens to me a lot in Metroid games where there's some timing thing that I just can't do for some reason. I have this often with the what is space boots or something like that, the space jumping thing where you just keep jumping. I find that timing on that terrible. And I remember when we played Super Metroid, there's also like the super leap where you're running fast and then you also like push down and double jump up or something, and like you shoot way up. Oh, that too. Yeah, that's another one. So all of these things, like, you know, when I run into them and I have trouble with them, I'm like, I'm going to spend the time now to really get this because I know it's going to happen again later, and I'm going to really want to be able to do it. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time on that, and then I was like, I finally did it.
I was waiting. I was waiting for the right moment. And the
done.
The universe delivered.
Yeah.
So the timing you're talking about, the difficulty of that timing, it's like fighting Artorias with a butter knife. Is what you're saying, right? Like learning the timing of fighting.
Right. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah,
that was my immediate reference point. For the rest of your life.
The rest of my life. It's proudest moment. And I think
Jen's going to be there. Your loved ones gathered around you. You're in your deathbed, and you're just going to be like, I remember.
I don't want my funeral on the easel where they usually have the picture of you. I don't want a picture of me. I want a picture of Artorias being beaten by me with a wreath of flowers.
Nice. Yeah.
Which wasn't there? No, it was flowers at his grave then. Yeah. Oh, that was a great moment afterwards. Okay, we got to stop. And the structure of the game also, like we were talking about with difficulty, like inherently in the structure of how Metroidvanias are built, the further you go, the more complex it is supposed to get. Right. Because you have more stuff.
Right.
So,
right. And they're going to chain them together in strange ways.
And they're going to chain them together because they can, because they have
morph balls boost into spider ball.
Which I'm thinking I know the room you're talking about, which I must not have something, but I tried to do the same thing. And I was like, how am I going to get up there? I can't. Yeah, so I wonder if...
what? Do you have the power bomb yet?
I do.
Oh, okay.
So no, I don't have the second upgrade, right? No,
right. Yeah. Okay.
I'm about to get that.
Yeah, you're about to get that. So yeah, you haven't gotten there yet because you need that to break through the floor there to reveal because you can see the things up there, the spider tracks, magnetic tracks, and you're. And I saw there's walk into a room and you're like, how am I going to get up there? There's other ways to get up to high places that are coming as well. So
I see. Okay, yeah, that's right. Because there was the scan clue about the floor that you can benzene or
Desium.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just I mean, I just feel like, especially like in the indie game space, right? Like Metroidvanias as a genre, Hollow Knight is a perfect example, or Dead Cells, which is now did a Castlevania literal crossover.
Yep.
There's that sort of like badge of honor, right? Of doing certain things in these games because they are so complex. It is very much like Dark Souls in that way, right? Where it's like, how the triumph of achieving some of those things.
Fiero, is the
Fiero, right.
You have that moment of Fiero where you're just like, amazing. I did it, and then your buddy texts you.
Yep.
You're like, I got to do it again.
So with the half pipes, I think finally the reason I was able to finally get up that half pipe, which is again, like for me, usually what happens is like in these games is I do get stuck and I just pound my head against the wall for many times. And then I was like, oh, I get it. It's one of those moments. I think my brain was telling me that if I were to chain together direction and timing of the charge up together enough, I would continue getting the momentum I need and eventually get up there. But what I didn't realize is you have to charge all the way up. You can't, it's not as cumulative as it needs to be. So
Yeah.
every time you charge up, you have to get it to its apex of charging to get the most boost. And I wasn't doing that quite, so I was just getting to the lip, but I was never quite getting over it.
Right.
So ever since then, the half pipes have been easy because I just make sure that I fully charge up and then let go at the right time,
Right.
and then it's been fine ever since. But it's like when you're done charging is not super clear.
Yeah.
There's lights and audio and stuff, but it's a bit squishy, and so I was just kind of overthinking it.
Yeah, no, I think I've been the same way. It's also with the directional stuff, especially if the camera is not situated in the perfect spot.
It's
and
not
with
great.
this controller, it's pretty tricky. I do not remember having that kind of trouble with them originally. Although this one that I just did with the magnetic track, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this being kind of a pain because the other side is open, so it's like you have to let go. You can't just like build up and still be pressing in that direction. You have to let go, otherwise you'll kick over the lip really easily, and so it's like you have to like shoot up straight and not be pushing in any direction as you on that side, and then the other side is where the magnetic track is, so you like have to build up the momentum really quick and then release everything and go, and just let it go, but then be ready to push it back the other way immediately. So it's
there's that other room that has one like that too, where the wall doesn't go all the way up, the half
right
doesn't go all the way up. You gotta like let it just stream in the air, kind of, and let it free fall.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're. Yeah. Well, and also with a power ball and spider ball at the same time, you're press and holding on both hands, right?
Oh yeah.
You have to press and hold on the trigger and also on B.
Yeah, you have to be ready to do it on
the trigger. Yeah.
On the trigger, yeah. But yeah, it's pain.
Yeah.
And I got a missile expansion for it. It was like, but it was really just the triumph of doing it. I'm going to do this. So yeah, it was. I think there might be another secret in that room too, and well, we'll see. But it was super annoying. It was, yeah.
Is there? So there's the occasionally you get a map upgrade, which gives you the map of the room of the area, but not the whole area, which is like frustrating. But is there? Do we eventually get a visor that lets you see upgrade or
You can see them with the X-ray
power ups.
You can see them with the X-ray visor because they glow.
So I don't feel like. Oh, okay. I don't have the X-ray. Wait,
I think you do.
You're talking about the infrared one, like the.
Yeah, it's called. I'm sorry, the thermal visor.
Yeah, because there's another X-ray one.
Yeah, the X-ray one is the one I just got. That's why I got it confused. Yeah, the thermal visor in many cases, not all cases, because I think there are things that you can't. That are shielded or something, so you can't see through.
Yeah,
because there may be things that it doesn't reveal. But missile expansions, you can.
There was a door. There's a door in the crash ship that is a metal door with a missile one behind it that you can hear. But I used the thermal visor and it wasn't. I couldn't see through the door, so I don't know if that was because the door's metal or what it is.
Yeah, I think it's certain types of walls and things that you can see through, so that you kind of can do that. There's one that I know that there's one there because I saw it on the thermal visor and cannot figure out how to get to it. So I'll be coming back to that one for sure. Yeah, they can be pretty. They can be pretty tricky. What else can be tricky is the bosses. How about that? How about that for a segue? Professional podcaster here.
Yeah.
We've played 3, I believe, right? You said the incinerator drone is incinerator.
They consider that one a boss. I mean, it is. It's a simple one, but yeah.
Yeah, and then, well, I guess there's the one on the ship as well.
On the ship, the beginning,
the bee, the thing. But then, on the planet particularly, and then Flagra, which is like a big flower. Which I kind of like, and it wasn't that hard this time, which was nice. And then, actually, none of the bosses were tough. I got the incinerator the first time. The other 2, I think, on the second try for each. Maybe 3 for Thardus, the big rock dude. I like the variety of those. There's a couple that are essentially stationary, but you've got to figure out how to, the drone is pretty simple, right? But the plant and having to, get around really quickly, like it's really straining your, like, do you know how to move around in this game yet? Have you got that? And then Thardus is a little bit of that. It's really just kind of managing the visors. So it's like they're teaching you really critical parts about the game. It feels a little final exam-y, but like, hey, keep in mind, you can switch to these things anytime, right? These visors. Mm-hmm. And we're going to make you switch between a couple of them to fight this boss. Or, you can go into the morph ball at any time, but you can't get around as fast that way. Actually, you can get around pretty fast with a morph ball, but it's a little harder to control because the camera feels a little weirder because you don't have the direct, first-person control. So I find that a little stranger to move around. It's just like, because it's got that kind of laggy camera. So it's like, if you really know where you're going, you can kind of do it. But that's not typically the way I like to move around. So you're having the same thing there, where it's like go between these two states, to do the different parts of this boss. The drone is not that way, obviously, because it's a lot simpler. And I don't remember the rest of them. What other bosses will fight, so I don't remember what else we'll experience in that way, but I just did really enjoy that experience of just, like, I got to do this, I got to run really fast to get over here and shoot that thing so the lamp is gone, and then he's swatting it back, and those are really good tests of your skill. They have the same fiero feeling, but they're serving a purpose, I feel, I guess is my, underlying point there, that they reinforce the sort of modes in the game.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of weirdly connects to our previous topic, in that in a game that does have layers, the onion layers of complexity as you go, having these skill tests that are also teachable moments are going to be pretty important. And like in the plant boss, for instance, like there's also the reinforcing target switching, and target lock on, because you don't have to do it, but it helps to like target lock on the light reflectors, and then target lock on the boss, and then
and
like
stun him and
stun him, and then like I said, switch to the ball at the right time and go in there, and then use your new ball ability there, and then come out and use your dash to get over, so you're right, they're layering in things that you, to give you confidence to use it more often and to remind you. And then Thardus, that was great with the visor. I liked that he was also a big rolling ball.
Yeah.
And
he's like the primordial morph ball.
Yeah. It's sort of like, I don't, whether it was intentional or, obviously it's intentional, but how tongue in cheek they're trying to be, I don't know how intentional that was, but it's just sort of funny to have this huge giant rock guy get into a ball like you do, and it almost looks just as ridiculous as when you do. Or more ridiculous. And, but then, going through the phases of it, and then using, I mean, you don't have to use missiles, but it helps to use missiles in some of those cases. And so it's giving you some variable options there if you want to kind of make things faster for yourself. I think I just, by the skin of my teeth, I did Thardus on the first try, but
nice.
I ended up having trouble on the plant boss. I don't remember why. I think it was navigating quickly enough.
That is a hard thing with it, snapping the reflectors back. I remember the first time I played it, I spent a long time on the plant for that reason, and this time I was like, when I got to it, I was like, oh no, I remember this guy. And then I did it the second time. I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, I remembered the gimmick, very quickly. I was like, oh, right, of course. So I guess all that practice I did 20 years ago really paid off.
I wonder, and I'm not trying to diminish your success, but I'm wondering it's also okay. if the remastered edition, if they did any retuning of things.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think that there's each edition of this has had subtle changes. I listened to another podcast. Oh, I'm going to have to track down the name of it so I can credit them. Sorry, I'll just put it in the show notes because my phone's nowhere near me. But I listened to another sort of retro gaming podcast doing similar sorts of discussions about Metroid Prime a while back. And I think they wrote into the show. Maybe somebody, one of the hosts wrote into the show, or somebody wrote in about them. But anyway, and they literally were talking about differences between different versions of the game, both between the collection version, because there was a Metroid Prime collection on the Wii that somebody was playing, and then somebody else was playing on the GameCube, but one person was playing NTSC and another person was playing PAL editions of the game, and even those were different, which was extremely surprising to me, although there are differences in television refresh rate between the two, between PAL and NTSC. So I assume because of that, they actually had to change some things up, especially in a skill-based game, right? Where it's, what exactly your frame rate is really matters. So, alluding to the mailbag conversation, if your frame rate is 24 because that's what your TV is doing, period, it's going to be different than if your TV is 30. I think that's the difference between PAL and. That's my recollection between PAL and NTSC.
It's a good point about skew, though, about how, Nintendo, I think, is I don't know, reputation wise, at least, good at, even though they're single platform, still good at I guess I take that back. Sometimes they are.
Sometimes yeah. I think they're more prone to reevaluate, at least the big ones, right? That they're going to re-release, I do know that they got some flack for it with the Mario collection a few years ago, the 25th edition, that some of the games were very bare bones ports, just like basically just an emulator, whereas one or two of the others got real treatment.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I was thinking of like all the various versions of Ocarina of Time, for instance, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Came out multiple times, and it seemed like each one was, they paid attention to what the platform differences were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. They definitely are selective. I wonder, do you think it was David's podcast you're thinking of? Because that sounds like
no. This was, they played. It's three or four British guys, and I think they were playing it over several episodes like we do, but not David Walensky and Game Thing with Pip and Bar is what Tim's referring to.
Yeah, right.
I've been listening to them. They did a series. They just finished a series on horror games where they play a horror game, a whole bunch of horror games, like 8 of them or something, and just talk about them for one episode a piece. And then at the end, they're going to kind of wrap up with some general thoughts about horror as a genre in games, and where it's successful and where it's not, and what it seems to be able to achieve, based on the examples they have. So interesting, worth you probably would enjoy listening to those.
So good plug.
Yep. Anyway, did you have any other thoughts on the bosses?
No, I don't think so. I think okay. I think I just, it is, these are technically, I guess they're first party, technically first party, second party, whatever you want to say. But what was I playing? Oh, Dark Souls. No, that was a joke.
With a butter knife?
That wasn't what I was thinking of. There was some other game where I was playing and there was a boss situation. And I don't remember what it was. It wasn't Dark Souls, but because it's a whole nother boss conversation. But playing the bosses in this game, it's just kind of there's a sort of, I think we probably talked about this with all the Nintendo games we've played so far. There's a certain amount of trust and it's not like lack of stress. Bosses always stress me out, but for some reason when I play Nintendo games, I feel like I trust that they've gone through what they've gone through to get to this point enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it's like, you know what? I just got to calm down. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. The bosses are fair. I just got to pay attention, do what they want me to do, and it'll be okay. Versus versus usually in boss games. Oh, actually, it might have been Hollow Knight. Now that I think about it, versus, and those are generally have been good, but there's still, it's like that, and there's still that stress.
Yeah, they're way more stressful. I definitely remember that. In fact, there was one that took me a real long time to get past, and I think I actually stopped playing. I feel like there was a second time you had to fight the same battle, but it was harder. I was like, oh man. No, I think that the thing that Nintendo does really well, and Metroid is a little bit different as far as like we were talking about, but with the Zelda games, the bosses actually have to be easy because they're usually based, the 3D ones at least. I don't remember too well the 2D as much. And Link to the Past definitely feels different in this regard. But the 3D ones, you've just got the gadget that you're going to use.
Yeah.
So it can't be too difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to be a like, oh, look what you can do now kind of moment, and not be especially challenging. Just enough, right? Just enough to feel like you did something. But if you look back on it, in most cases you're like, oh yeah, I did all of them the first time, right? They're not super complicated usually. And they can be very thrilling nonetheless, right? And they do a lot of really good work with framing of what's happening and telegraphing and making the things seem really challenging, both because of size or just how they move, whatever. And Metroid's a little different in that, like I said, it's more final exam-y, which means the difficulty actually, while still not cresting, being really, really difficult, they're still quite difficult, right? Because it's not a Dark Souls where you're going to spend a million years, right here, because there's no opportunity to get better. You can only improve your player skill. You can't like grind and get anything else. I guess you could grind to get, some additional energy tanks if you're just having a hard time dodging attacks. But, with that exception, it's basically, can you do the thing, right? And, when I first played this game and with Flagra, I just couldn't do the thing. So, it's definitely a little different in that regard. And I think that's, their different franchises are that way, right? They're, the Zeldas, are more easygoing on the bosses. I'm not really sure what I would say about Mario in this regard, but I was thinking like Donkey Kong, having just played some rare games, Donkey Kong's are pretty challenging platformers, and, so, and they go kind of a little harder core. And so the 2D Mario we played, Super Mario World or whatever, had pretty difficult bosses. So, not tons of them, but they were Bowser, mostly Bowser, could be difficult, so,
yeah,
especially at the end when you're fighting the, was it little Bowser or something in this little spaceship or whatever? That was difficult.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah, I know.
I block Mario out of my head anyway. But.
I know.
Whereas
I can still remember the time that Alex Noisy sent him an email to the whole LucasArts division saying Tim Longo has never played a Mario game. So
yeah, that sounds about right.
That's Alex for you. Okay, well, let's then talk about. You wanted to talk a little bit about the design of the suit, and then we can talk about some favorite stuff. Just kind of pick some things out before hitting that email. You had a point about the suit, though.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty. I mean, obviously the suit stuff they're doing is generally keys that aren't keys situations, right? And man, this game is
progression blockers. Yeah,
this is sure full of games. Keys without keys. And the thing is they have multiple progression blockers, so it's so funny that they have done it that way, because there's times when you can't even get to the area you shouldn't be in anyway. So
right,
it's a little.
But then you get in there and there's like another blocker. I was walking through some area today where I was like, this is really ingenious because you need to have the double jump even to have gotten to that, and then if you did that immediately, you'd get to another thing you couldn't do yet. And then beyond that, there was a third thing. So it like at each step, it was like, no, you really shouldn't be going this way. Like, go do the other stuff, It reinforces that with the level design.
That's why I was saying, I think in that first episode or second episode, it's like this kind of level design just gives me gives me hives because it's just enigmas wrapped inside of enigmas, in a way, and in a great way, right? But really, like as a player, you feel like once you achieve these things, you're like, wow, yeah, I really did it. But but as a level designer, it's just maddening.
Yeah.
But specifically, it's not necessarily about the suit per se, but it's specifically about when you get the gravity suit and how, which they must, I'm sure they do this in even the 2D ones. I'm just not thinking about it, but you're seeing water. In fact, once you here's some of the brilliance that I love. When you kill so there's poison toxic water, right, throughout the first portion of the game in the ruins and stuff, and then you fight the boss, and then you clear the water up, right? You cure it, and you make it not toxic. And in some cases, water fills in rooms, and you have some control over that. In a couple of cases, stuff like that. But water, especially in a first-person shooter game, a first-person adventure-y kind of shooter game, water is often kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, for me, it kind of doesn't dawn on you right away that water in a space that you've been in, and that because your original suit allows you to go underwater for as long as you want, right? As a little submarine.
You got a rebreather or whatever.
Yeah, you're used to being in the water, right? And it's like, and it acts the way it would. It's like, oh, water, yeah, it's kind of going to be slower. Oh, I can't jump as high. Okay, interesting. And then to me, I think, okay, I probably will drain this water at some point, and that's how I will be able to jump up. But water is just like, it's a part of, because they're trying to fully realize a 3D world like this planet, you're going to find water. But and they introduce you to it, and you fall into it, and you're like, oh, it's murky and it's mysterious and cool, and you feel like you're swimming, and that's all awesome. But then you get a suit that changes water into not water.
Yeah.
And it's kind of brilliant because it allows level designers and environment artists to make something feel realistic, like grounded and realistic. Like the example I'll give is the water around the crashed ship, outside the crashed ship, right? Where you can get to that pretty early, and you're like, ooh, this is deep, and what am I going to do here someday? And then you get the gravity suit, and you go back there, and you're like, wait a second, and all they did was change the property of the water. They didn't do anything, I mean, obviously there's a lot of level design and artwork going in there, but from a player's perspective, it's almost like games that turn gravity upside down, and now you're walking on the ceiling,
right?
Where you're like, oh, everything, it was still the same, but it's not the same, and but it's all they did was give you a new suit, that allowed you to see better in the water, and then move normally. And not only that, and it's such a trick because it's not like the suit really did anything.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the water, you're just acting as if you were outside of the water. It's just they just flipped a bit and then made it clearer to visually, and it's just, it feels empowering, but it's such a clever thing. I thought
it's very smoke and mirrors, right? It feels, as you're playing it, it feels really different. But if you stop to think about it, it's like, oh no, this is just like everywhere else I am. I go, and Fusion has that as well. There's a whole thing with the gravity suit. And
I'm sure the gravity suit's in every game. I just forgot.
Yeah, I think that's a thing. But yeah, you definitely have that. Like, oh wow, now I can go all these places I couldn't go before. Or maybe there's secrets in all these places I've been. It just, you have to rethink. Like, I didn't make any notes. I've been keeping notes of things, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, there's a cordite, whatever. I'm gonna be able to do a thing with that. Or there's a Bendesium thing, so I'm going to have to come back to here. I've been making notes and putting them down and taking the names from the maps so I can just find them again. And but I didn't write down water.
Yeah, right.
I didn't write down, oh, there's water here. I forgot. And as soon as I got the gravity, it's like, oh man, I didn't write down any of those. I don't know where any of those are. So if there are places where I've missed things, so it's actually funny because it reminds me too that I scan all the time, right? I'm constantly scanning, and I've got like 91% of the world scans. And
nice.
And there's still times where I I'll go into an area I've been through a dozen times, and I just happen to have the scanner on, and I see something that I'm like, oh, I didn't scan that tree. Who knew?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't scan that. See that grass that's hanging upside down up there? Yeah, I guess I missed that. And it's the same thing where it's, I'm going to end up not getting 100% on the scans. I'm going to be like 99.9%. I'm not going to know. I'm just going to abandon that. I should give up on it now because I know I'm not going to get it. I just know it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The scan, those, I'm really mixed on the scan percentage stuff because because you can lock yourself out, right, of things if you didn't scan them, because you will never get another opportunity, and that's
right, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, and I think, and I'm sure we're confident that gravity suits in maybe in many of the games, the 2D games. I think the other point that I'm trying to make here too is that because this is a 3D first person game, for me at least, water takes on a different connotation than, I feel like in the 2D games, it's more obvious that they're going to let you go through water someday. You know what I mean? Because you're just looking at this pool and you look across to the right side of the screen and you're like, well, I got to get over there someday. So they're going to, I'm going to get in the water and do stuff and somehow, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason in this context, because I expect there to be water at the end of a waterfall, and I'm looking at this cool grotto kind of area, it kind of didn't, it didn't, it's more of a revelation, even though the smoke and mirrors is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because it's such a fully realized place. So anyway.
Yeah. The other thing too is that the way because you're viewing it in first person compared to the 2D games where you're looking side on, and it's very clear that the geometry is jumpable. You can tell because the metrics by heart, right? So when you're in a room with water in it, where you can get out on one side but not the other, you can literally see, oh, I'm going to be able to jump on that, because you can see the metric right there in front of you. Whereas in this, I think the physics is a little floaty.
It's more squishy, yeah.
Yeah, so it ends up it's not as readable from first person perspective. I think it still works fine. I mean, I don't love the jumping because I frequently am like panicky. I'm like jumping a little bit and I'm feeling like I got to pull back. Yeah, it just feels a little, like I want to stick the landing or something. I don't want to have any momentum or something. Like I don't know what it is that I want, but it doesn't feel exactly right. But it's good. It's just not, it's not perfect. Or it doesn't,
it's not very Metroid.
It doesn't hit me perfectly. Yeah, exactly.
In a way, right? It's the 2Ds are very, very precise.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. Certainly playing Fusion alongside, I was like, oh, this is like, there are times where you just are counting on exactly hitting the metric, right? And here that's not the case at all. Especially with the double jump, everything feels like I could overshoot this. I have, a number of times. I've had some times where I don't know if one of my controllers is starting to have drift, but I've like jumped up there and just like it kept going. I was like, no, pull back. So I've had those issues as well. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's talk about some maybe areas that you particularly enjoyed, or rooms that you're like, that was a really cool room, or puzzles. So why don't you pick one out for me, and then maybe I'll give one.
Yeah, I don't remember where they are, but I've enjoyed a couple of the morph ball side scrolling ones. And there was one actually. Oh yeah, this was a water one. Oh
yeah, with the energy tank at the top.
Yeah. Because you realize that the physics of how far you're going to be boosted up is different now because you're in water.
Yeah.
And so that was a good one. Finding that energy tank was a great example. And it was layered on top of critical path too. So they're sort of like, wait, why is this shaft go further?
Yeah.
And because I'm playing with audio, I could also hear it up there. But so that was a good like small example. But the one room that I've appreciated quite a bit was, I mean, it's really kind of more of a hub and spoke room. It wasn't necessarily too bad, but the thing is, I got stuck. Remember I told you I was stuck in a couple sessions ago, or last session or whatever, and I don't know what happened. I would call it maybe a bug. So there's the statue in the room of the elders, the Hall of Elders,
Yes.
that you turn into a ball and then it picks you up and it throws you.
Right. Yes.
So I had turned into a ball on top of those hands a couple times, thinking that that was what I was supposed to do, and it didn't trigger.
Oh,
And
weird.
and I don't know if I was just like a little bit off or what
Yeah,
happened.
weird.
So I assumed that wasn't the solution. So I spent a long time like thinking of everything else but that. And then I actually did end up, full disclosure, looking that up
Yeah.
because I was like, I don't know what to do in this room. But
You
I'm
had done the
almost
thing.
positive.
Yeah.
I think it was just because it's physics based, so it's finicky, and I could have been a little bit on the edge, and didn't
Right.
trigger it or something.
Right.
So anyway, but once I figured that out, that room. I love rooms that have multiple return times, multiple entrance and exits. That whole like bridge thing that rotates,
Yeah.
and then the statue throws you multiple times for each one. Of course, I haven't done the last one yet because I don't have the plasma beam, but but like that sort of like, again, it's kind of a hub for that area, and I think it's going to come up for the artifacts probably eventually.
Oh, almost certainly. Yeah.
And I've enjoyed the ruins section quite a bit, probably the most, because I just like that kind of stuff, and I think that they've done a good job because it's the first section you go into. They've done a good job at making it when you return to it each time, you're peeling the onion, and because you've seen it so many times, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go back to this room. Oh yeah, that's right, the water's clear now because I did that other thing. Oh, now I have these tools. Oh, I can get, so it's just good. It's my favorite layering there, even though you go back to each of the other ones too. The lava one I'm not as a fan of, just because I guess it's just the lava. I don't know if we get something eventually that prevents that from being a thing. I don't think we do, but
no, I think what you get there, actually, one of the things I like about it is you can see all the grapple points.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm going to be able to get through here so fast.
Yeah.
And whenever I see a grapple point, that's what I think is like, I'm going to have to come through here again because I'm going to be looking for those artifacts at the end of the game. I'm not going to know where they are. And so I'm going to be going all over the map constantly. I think actually the hint system may tell you where the artifacts are. It just takes a while before it triggers, right? So I can't remember if that's true, but I think it might be.
I have not turned hints off. I kept them on. Yeah.
I put them back on, and then I was in the middle of doing something. I was probably trying to get that morph ball zoom spider, whatever. And one interrupted me. I was like, oh man. So I turned it off. I had turned it on because it had been some time between, like I played weekend to weekend, and whenever I come back, I no idea what I was doing. So that's typically what happens. I turn it back on, and then I turn it off as soon as it irritates me once. It's like, I know it's there. I'm doing other stuff now. Please go away. So I turn it off. So
I need constant reminders.
I
think it's the hint system is a good point in that, because it's a 3D game, and the map, I think they did the best they could with making a Metroid game in this structure, but it's not conducive to a Metroid game. The Metroidvania formula is very 2D, I think. And and they try. I mean, I applaud them. It's still a brilliant game, and I applaud them for religiously sticking to the formula.
Yeah.
But navigating that map and like, okay, how do I get from here to here? And
if they had better connected the elevators.
Yeah.
What I want is to leave the map while highlighting one elevator, and to just go to the world map and have the other elevator be highlighted. Right. So I can just go directly to that cell. Because all the cells correspond to rooms.
Yeah.
That's all I want, is to know, because I can't remember, and that's not something I took notes about. I should have. But it took me a long time to realize, because generally speaking, you finish something and there's an elevator there that you go to next. So you don't have to kind of remember how the elevators connect. By the time you realize that you can't easily determine where your elevator's going, it's too late and you haven't taken the notes. And now you've got a dozen elevators. You have no idea where they go. Cause it'll say like Chozo Ruins South. I'm like, there's no compass. Like South isn't meaningful.
There is a compass, but it doesn't, I mean, you never use it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's up there. I think it's up there in the corner.
Does it have the direction?
I think so. It's
tiny. Wow. I haven't even noticed. Oh, you know what? North, I've seen the floating arrow there. I guess I didn't even read it as
a compass.
Oh,
but I don't. But it's not effective. You know, it's
it's not.
North doesn't mean anything.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's like north. What north south? I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. I mean, I know where it came from and why they leaned on it, but
the other thing is that the control of the map is, for whatever reason, very counterintuitive to me. I'm constantly tilting it the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. Yeah. I agree.
So that's another thing. There's lots of little fiddly things with the map that are frustrating. Like I zoom out because I'm like, okay, I want to try to figure out where I'm going. So I'll zoom way out and then I'll go to the world map. I'll go to another map and it'll be zoomed back in again. I'm like, can't you just keep the zoom level that I just had? Because, next thing, more claw hand as I, squeeze the controller to make it zoom out. It's funny because I actually enjoy the magma caverns just because I'm seeing it's very clear. Like I'm going to come back through here and I'm just going to like swing right through these rooms. And I really like that, knowing, being able to see the future and feel that way. I did have a really a fun puzzle experience where I thought it was a really clear, crisp example, and I don't think you've quite got there yet, but you're about to maybe, because you're in the ship.
No, I'm in the mines.
Maybe it's in the mines that this. Yeah, it's in the mines. So you're probably about to get there. You maybe have even gotten to this room. There's a room where you see. I think you see the first. I think it's the first elite alpha or whatever, the giant ones, and it's in a tank.
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay, yeah. So up at the top with the gun, the laser that cuts into the walls, that's a great thing. Like it shows you the power device. It's a spinner. When you get into the spinner, you can see the gun clearly. It also has environmental storytelling there of like the laser is pointed at a wall, the only wall in that section that has been knocked down.
Yeah.
Like there's a hollow there. You can scan all those things, and you're like, you don't know what to do, but I do think you have the visor, so you actually can see the door on the other side of the wall if you even go to that step. I, of course, just like blasted all the walls because I was, it was like, well, I mean, there's something behind one of these. And in fact, there was, spoilers. But, that kind of just simple chain of logic is a very, like, as you come up those jumping platforms, you see the things that you're going to use. Like, oh, there's a spinner there. I wonder what that does. So, of course, you get into the spinner. You can also scan the three things, one of which turns on the laser, and you'll hear the laser behind you if you scan it from that side. So it's just like, oh, I wonder what that is. You turn around, you go into the ball. It's like, oh, I can turn this thing. But now you've seen the wall. It's just like this series of events that tells you, it's not even really a puzzle, in the sense like it doesn't take any really serious thought. But you feel clever because all of the clues have been just like given to you right there, and it feels like very natural to put them together. It's like, I feel like there's a thing about mysteries, on film, or in plays or whatever, where you want the audience to have already added 1 and 1 to get 2 right before the detective does. Right. So the audience feels like, I did it. I know what it is. And then the detective says it at the same time. Like whenever I read a mystery book, if I'm not like, I don't generally try to solve them as I read them. I enjoy the journey. I don't really care about the puzzle, for me. But it's the same thing of like, oh, it all, like I see it all now, and then on the next page, the detective brings everybody into the drawing room and reveals who the murderer is. It's like, well, of course you did. A good mystery writer will really be feeling that way. So yeah, that's something I feel like is a very Nintendo feeling with these sorts of, environmental because it's not really a heavy puzzle game. The puzzles are really just how do I interact with this, but they feel deeper than most action adventure games.
Yeah, it's not just an interact that you're doing.
Yeah,
It's you're putting you do have to put two and two together, and yeah, and I think that spinner device where it um, changes the trajectory of something. They've used that, I think, cleverly in a few places
yeah,
where you're like spinning and closing something, and sometimes there's a timer, or whatever, right? And that was one that's the best one so far of
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I like that one a lot. So that's definitely one of those things. And they use the spinners a lot. There's a whole room with a bunch of spider ball paths, but you have to go to each level and spin the thing around and then jump down to the bottom and climb up the central column. And that's a good room, although there's a Bendesium thing that's blocking one of them. So you have to come back to this room. It's probably for a power up, but I don't know. I certainly don't remember. But yeah, again, that's sort of seeing like, oh, okay, there's another cool thing here. I have to remember to come back here. Is another fun thing that happens with those sorts of puzzles. Like, oh, I can just kind of look up and I can see, because they do a really good job framing the camera generally when you're in the morph ball to do a puzzle. Because they know exactly what you need to know. So it's another kind of part of it. They're not going to point the thing in the wrong direction and let you try to figure out what's going on. They literally just show you the reaction. I did this thing. Oh, and this happened. Okay. Yeah. All right. I can figure this out from here. So another good tidbit for design there in terms of how they do those things.
I wonder what I guess Metroid Prime could be considered this, but I still think they stuck to the formula, even though it's such a different format. They stuck to the formula pretty well. So and I love the format of first person, as we know. So I'm such a big fan of this game. But I was about to say is I wonder what the Breath of the Wild for Metroid would be, and I don't necessarily just mean open world, but like how would they take it into a kind of a fairly new direction.
Yeah.
And break the formula somehow.
I mean, I'd love to find out that that's what the 4 is going to be, but I don't know that we'll get that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, that would be a bold new direction, and would be. I mean, it would also, these games take a long time to build, and certainly games like this take a long time to build. Although I feel like the Metroid Prime trilogy. Well, no, it didn't really. I was going to say the Metroid Prime 2 wasn't terribly long after Metroid Prime, but I do feel like, maybe not. Maybe they're about the same apart or something like that. So maybe a couple, 3 years between them. Something I don't remember. A couple of years maybe between 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3 was maybe a little bit longer because it was the new platform going to the Wii. Yeah, now I'm like, I wonder if my dad still has my copy of Metroid Prime 3. I have to snag that one back.
That's weird.
I gave a bunch of games to my dad, and he tried them all. You remember? I asked. I haven't even told you about. He asked me like, "Is D&D's really big again?" It seems. I was like, "Oh yeah, it's been streaming." He's like, "Yeah, I've heard there's these things called live plays," and I was like, "Well, you should try the dungeon run."
Oh, nice.
So my father might be watching that. I don't know. I mean, I told him like, feel free to skip combat. If you're not into it, like just skip ahead. You don't have to. Because I think that I even at times would be like, this is fine, but it's not. I'm usually doing something else while that's happening. I enjoy the story a lot more. I think they do a really good job. Anyway, that's a total tangent. Let us, unless you have anything else to tackle, let's get that email in.
Yeah. We're going to be caught up with email.
Yeah, all the way caught up between our mailbag and this one. This was sent, of course, to devgameclub@gmail.com. And because it was long, I'm going to make Tim read it.
Okay. That's,
I also give you all the ones with hard to pronounce names. I don't know if you've picked that up over the last 7 years.
Well, that's just, I'm terrible at words. So in general, so I just figured that was par for the course.
Well,
You
you
could
know,
give me
Steve
any. You
Martin.
could give me anything, and I'll struggle with it. So
You
anyway,
you know
um,
that what Steve Martin says.
no, oh, I
Some
don't
people have a
remember.
way with words, Tim, and some people no have way. I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well said.
Thank you.
Old
It's
man
not
joke.
me. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, subject is Metroid Prime. So we're actually reading it in mail while we're playing the series, which is a kind of a first sometimes. From the Second Quest. Hello, Second Quest. It may have been pointed out by others already, but worth noting that not only did Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion release in the same year, they were released only one day apart from one another in some places, with Fusion hitting first and the same day elsewhere. I did forget about that, but when you mention it, I remember that being a big deal and a kind of a neat thing. So he goes on, very much a result of Nintendo's effort to push the GameCube. I always hate that abbreviation. And GBA, like a link cable concept. By beating Prime, oh, I remember this now. Yes, by
Mm-hmm.
beating Prime and connecting Fusion, you would unlock Samus's Fusion suit from that game to play in Prime. Likewise, beating Fusion and linking them would unlock the original NES game to play, which originally was to also include Super Metroid, but the use of a third party emulator forced its removal. Interesting. Okay. They intended to try the concept again with Zero Mission and Prime 2, but those games ended up coming out much farther apart and the idea was dropped. As for Metroid Prime itself, you touched briefly on the controls, um, but they did feel pretty natural at the time. Most people seem to prefer modern dual stick and or the motion controls from the trilogy release, though the latter necessitated the removal of certain arm cannon effects in the Wii version, and as Samus's arm was now no longer position locked. But I've always enjoyed circle strafing of a more automated nature that allowed you to focus on other combat elements, avoiding the shooting at ankles in a panic that can come from dual stick controls, particularly the controls of games of the early GameCube era. So, going from the C buttons to the N64 controller for GoldenEye to the lock-on style Metroid Prime made a pretty natural transition, especially with Ocarina of Time's Z targeting coming out in between the two to make for an instinctual bridge. However, I haven't had a chance to play the remastered version yet, so perhaps the modern dual stick controls will fit me just fine, or fit me fine today, or at least make for a different type of play experience to make a second playthrough of the game distinct from my original. One thing I didn't necessarily care for in the original Prime 1, however, was the super shiny, semi pastel look to Samus's armor in third person. Yeah, I've noticed this. It's the shader that they're using. Something that they adjusted for Prime 2, one of the smaller among many reasons I still prefer Prime 2 out of the whole trilogy. But that's ultimately a nitpicky and personal preference. Plus, it's not even an issue in the remastered version. The rest of the game truly looks great. I think that was a typo.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just read it too. I
Billy,
was like, oh yeah, the
the
rest of the rest of
second
the rest.
quest. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. So I think, well, maybe it's improved in the remaster, but I did notice, the way that they're using the metal shader on the armor does desaturate the color and disperse the color quite a bit. So it's not as like vibrant um, as other like the world is, for instance, the level geometry. So it's an interesting detail that I agree with. I did remember, yeah, and that's actually why I remember being excited. And I think I never finished Fusion, so I remember being excited about that crossover. Although I did finish Prime, so wait, so then I would have. No,
You would
you
have been
need to.
able to. Yeah, I think I did do this at the time from Fusion to. Oh, which direction would I have done it? I remember doing this. I had forgotten all about it. Like I never in a million years would have thought about it. But I had the link cable. I had both games, or at one point I had both games because I borrowed the Metroid Prime. Um, and I think I did this. I think I did Prime to Fusion.
Yeah. And the other thing he mentions in here that I really agree with, and it's a great point, is that we've talked about the controls on the Switch already some, but my memory of it on GameCube was that it did feel really good. The lock-on targeting I'm talking about, and I didn't miss the dual stick feel that Halo was modernizing at the time, etc. I mean, I was still largely a PC player anyway, so it didn't kind of matter. But his point that, the dual stick works fine and generally good in the Switch version, but the lock on is a little finicky because of the Switch, at least in handheld, because the triggers the throw on the sticks isn't great. The triggers are tiny throw on there. It's just, it's very clicky. And the GameCube had those, had the Z targeting and the big triggers and all that stuff. So there's pros and cons. But his point about,
they also had that sort of like, I feel like they had like push halfway.
Yeah, they had analog triggers.
They had analog triggers, but they also had, there was like a hitch in the middle.
There was a separate click. Yep.
Yeah.
That's how they got around I know when I've past a certain threshold. Yeah, but almost nobody used it.
Yeah.
But
it felt really good in the hand, right?
Yeah.
Love that controller and the way.
But his point about the thing that the lock-on gets you that is very difficult for people in dual stick is that I can lock on and I can pay attention to other things.
Yeah.
In Metroid, which there's a sort of brilliance there where they were bucking the trend of dual stick. Well, they didn't even care. The trend wasn't even a trend at that point. They just did what they were going to do. But it's a really good point that is something you lose, having worked on many first-person shooters with dual stick control. That is something you lose for players. If you start making things too complex for them to pay attention to, while they're also dual sticking, you can go too far. But if you're locked on, you're like, well, I'm locked on. I'm just going to like look at location targeting, or I'm going to look around the room, or
you can also do you can do more with your hands if you're locked on, because they also have the jump, quick strafe. You can push the stick and jump, and you quickly move. Like some of the enemies that you have to shoot from behind, now they have a way that they can do that feels fair. Like that doesn't feel good in a dual stick context, because you have to get there. You're probably not going to be turning around as you do it, because that's a lot for your brain to do. So you'll get there and you'll turn around. Now the thing's already moved and you're not behind it, right? So it enables, it enables you feeling really maneuverable, because they can do things like that as well. So terrific.
And
thing.
going back to your point last episode, I think, or maybe it was this episode. I don't know. The general point that it was last episode where the utility of guns being more tools.
Yeah.
Now that I come to think about it, it's almost critical that they have lock on for a Metroid game like this, because you need to power them up. You need to lock on to sometimes you're locking onto the world, physical objects, and you do have to press many buttons at once, and that kind of, so it facilitates the tools nature of their weapons more easily too, because you're not having to like do all of the button pressing and aim and use a tool. It's like, I don't know.
The crab really hand problem would have been even worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're also trying to like use your thumbs to pinpoint accurately to hit something.
Right.
Imagine the plant boss without lock on.
Oh yeah, forget about it. Yeah. No, I think it's a good point. I mean, I love the feel of this game, and I'm not doing anything that makes it feel specifically dual sticky, other than movement and looking. But whenever I'm in combat, I'm using the lock on always, like even against the whatever space pirates or whatever.
Yeah,
those guys are real jerks, by the way.
yeah, they're definitely, especially the flying ones.
Yeah, they're a pain. Going 3 of these guys. Anyway, thanks for the email. Billy, the second quest. Did you know, by the way, his older brother, Johnny, also known as the main quest? Didn't know if you knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Also,
Johnny Quest?
I slipped that in there too. I wanted to see if you'd pick up on that.
Nice. Another old man joke. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Keep them coming.
There were these things called shows. You had to watch them by being at your couch and television at a particular day and time. Anyway, thanks for sending that along to devgameclub@gmail.com. We'd love to see your reviews as well. I checked today. We didn't have any new ones. I do have a singing review that one of these days I'm going to study up on that Flight of the Conchords. So I promise. I meant to do it for the mailbag episode. I totally forgot. It's just hard to find multiple times to go through a particular song. Anyway, you can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also occasionally find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Yes, and someday he will also go back to killing things with butter knives on his Twitch. I'm making no such promises, but our names are there in the show notes as well. We have a Discord. Come check us out. We have a growing community there, very welcoming. Talk about stuff other than just the game we're playing. People also talk about games done quick is a very common popular topic, or their particular gaming setup builds has been a thing that's been going around a little bit lately, and or even just people who do streaming of their own or are developing games as hobbies. All can be found there. Good fun. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friendly cast Aaron Evers, and our logo and our merch store and our Discord, with the help of some others, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun switching between your various visors this week, and good night.
Good night.